Spreadsheet Scholar, we're going to learn how to use named cells and named ranges in Excel, but we're going to cover a whole lot more, including techniques for editing cells without touching the mouse, and we'll learn some common errors that I've seen students repeat over the years, and hopefully you can avoid similar mistakes. Let your excellence continue, and let's learn. The workbook file that we're going to start with can be downloaded from our usual Google Drive at bit.ly/excel-starter-files, all lowercase, and you'll want to find the file named FB Revenue Starter. Right-click that, select Download. I'm going to save mine to my Excel book exercises folder, and since I'm in Chrome, I can see when the file is done downloading in the lower left-hand corner, so I'll just double-click this icon and the file opens in Excel. Now I'm also going to use the Excel Save As function to save this file as my last name, first initial -FB revenue, and that's just to distinguish it from the unedited file that I just downloaded. If your instructor has told you to save this file with a different convention, please use that. Now the data we're looking at shows Facebook's revenue by region for the years 2019 and 2017. And for those students learning about technology businesses and studying the Facebook chapter in our IS textbook, you've got the added bonus of being able to look at the firm's pretty amazing recent growth and how this revenue breaks down in different regions around the globe. Now the first thing that we're going to do is simply highlight the cells from B4 to B7, but we're going to pay attention to the very bottom area of our Excel window. This is known as the status bar. The status bar displays messages and information, and right now we're seeing summary calculations for the selection that we've just made. So if you look in the lower right, you'll see average, count, min, max, and sum. Most of the time, if this data is important to you, you're going to create a formula and display it inside of the cells, but if you ever need to quickly consider the summary stats, they're available with just a quick look at the status bar. Now you can also customize what's displayed in the status bar by right-clicking on the status bar. Here you see the check marks next to the summary figures that we were just looking at. Selecting an item acts as a toggle, so you can just select an item to remove or add a check to hide or show it in the status bar. Most of these items are checked by default. If you're curious about some of these options and want to further customize your status bar in non-standard ways, feel free to search online. There's lots of information and help available, but right now we're going to keep things as they are. In cell B8, let's get a total of our 2019 revenue. So first, let's click on cell A8 and we'll put the word total in there. Then we'll head back to B8, and to get a total, let's click on the sigma symbol up here, and ho-ho! We have a selection that we hadn't anticipated. And you should always take a look at any selection that Excel has made, because sometimes Excel will guess wrong. And indeed, that's what happened here. Excel not only selected all of the dollar values for our 4 regions, it also selected 2019. Now, why did it do that? Well, 2019 is a number, and since it's a number, Excel put it in the range with all the other numbers that are part of the sum function. Now to change this, we can simply click back in cell B8, highlight the cell range up in the formula bar, and then replace that by highlighting the correct range from B4 through B7. Now I use the mouse to make this selection, but everything we just did can also be accomplished without taking our fingers off of the keyboard. I'll press the escape key to undo the corrected range, and we'll do the same thing using just the keyboard. So let me describe how to do this, and you can follow along with me typing the exact same keys, and you can learn how to use the keyboard-only cell editing method if you'd like. Now, as we use this method, I want you to pay attention to the left side of the status bar. It currently has the word ready in there, but that's going to change. So make sure that we've selected cell B8, and what I'm going to type is on the Mac, I'm going to type Control-U. In Windows, type the F2 key, that's function key 2, and this puts me into cell edit mode. Now, I can see the formula that was in the cell. This is actually the sum function. My cursor's at the end of the contents of the cell, and you see the word edit show on the left side of the status bar where the word ready was. This indicates that we're now in edit mode. Now, when I'm in edit mode, I can edit the formula. Typing the arrow keys won't move me around the worksheet. Instead, moving the arrow keys in edit mode moves the cursor selection forward or backward through the text inside of the cell. So I'll give that a try, and then here's another handy tip. I'll move back to the end of the text of the cell, but then if I hold down the Option key on the Mac or the Alt key on Windows, and then while holding that down, press the left arrow, I jump forward by a single word. Now if you do this once, it's not obvious because Excel treats punctuation like the closing parenthesis as a single word, but hold down Option or Alt again while pressing the left arrow, and the cursor jumps from the end of the address B7 to the beginning of B7. So B7 is treated like a single word. Option or Alt left arrow again, you move past the colon, but one more time, and you're ahead of B3. Again, it's treated as if it's one word. Option or Alt arrow again, you're in front of the open parentheses, and one more time, and now we're ahead of the sum function. It jumped forward all 3 letters. So on the Mac, Option, on Windows, Alt, plus the arrow keys is a super handy way to cut down on keystrokes. It works in the other direction too, so let's Option or Alt right arrow until we're just before the closing parentheses. Now you can also modify this shortcut to make a selection while you jump forward or backward. Just hold down the Shift key along with the Option key on the Mac Mac or the Alt key on Windows. So let's give this a try. I'm going to do Shift Option left arrow since I'm on the Mac. Windows users do Shift Alt left arrow. And you can see I've just selected B7 with a single press, then do it 2 more times, and the whole cell range is selected. And since this is the range that was causing us problems, just press the Delete key and that'll get rid of it. Now we could just type in our new cell range here, but if we want to use our keyboard keys to select cells, we've got to switch out of edit mode and into what's called enter mode. Now see in the lower left-hand corner of the status bar, we're still in edit mode. So to switch into enter mode so that we can use the arrow keys to perform the selection, we use the same keyboard shortcut we use to enter edit mode. That's Control U on the Mac or Function key 2, F2 on Windows. So type that now and notice the word enter has replaced edit in the lower left of the status bar. This means we can use the arrow keys to select cells. I wish Microsoft had called this select mode instead of enter mode, but with practice, this will seem like second nature to you. So while we're in enter mode, press the up arrow key and notice we're still updating the formula in the cell, but we've added address B7, which is the cell we got to by pressing the up arrow. So that's what we get with enter mode. We wouldn't have been able to jump up one cell and select this cell if we were still in edit mode. Now also notice the word enter has been replaced in the status bar. It now says point. That's because we've left the cell where we were originally entering and now we're pointing at a different location in our worksheet. So the arrow keys will move us around to select a single cell, but if you want to make a selection using the keyboard, well, we learned how to do this in an earlier video. You just hold down the shift key while pressing the arrow key once, twice, 3 times, and we've selected a range from B4 through B7. Now press return, and we've accepted the changes we've made while editing the cell. The status bar now says ready, and we've updated the cell without touching the mouse at all. Nice work! So if you need to, feel free to rewind this video, practice these techniques on your own, and with a little repetition, you'll be tooling around your worksheet super quick without taking your hands off the keyboard. Now I also want to show techniques for getting Excel to treat a number as text so that it's not used in a calculation. And again, to demonstrate this, while we're in cell B8, if I click on sum again, it still highlights B3, which is supposed to be a header, but Excel is treating this as a number since 2019 is all numbers, there's no text in that cell, and Excel puts this in the function's range selection. Let's press return to accept this. We'll keep the range B3 through B7 for now, but we'll change the contents of B3 so that it's no longer a number and it won't be used in this calculation. One way to turn a numeric value into text is by putting an apostrophe in front of the number. So let's do this using only the keyboard. So we'll move our cursor to cell B3. We're still in ready mode, see in the status bar here, but let's get into edit mode by pressing Control U on the Mac or the F2 key on Windows. And now let's jump to the front of 2019. We'll press Option left arrow on the Mac. That would be Alt left arrow on Windows. And while we're in front of 2019, just press the apostrophe key. Now before we press return, notice the total value in cell B8. It's 72,716. Now press return. That changes the contents of cell B3 into text. So if we have text in a range we're trying to sum up, that text is ignored. So we see that our total in B8 now goes down by 2019 because that's no longer a valid number, and we see that the result is now 7697. Now we don't see the apostrophe in the cell, but we do see the contents of the cell has been left justified. That's Excel's default for cells that don't contain numbers. This is not considered to be a numeric value in a cell anymore. It's considered to be text. Now you also see a little green error triangle in the upper left corner of the cell that has 2019 in it. Excel will pop up these little warnings when it notices a difference between what's in the cell and what it's been programmed to expect. And if you click on cell B3, you can see just to the left of that cell, there's a little yield sign with a pull down arrow in it. If you click the down arrow to reveal information about the warning, you can convert this back into a number. You can get more information about the warning by selecting help on this error. I don't think Excel should call these errors. This is really a warning, not an error. And in fact, we could ignore this error because the cell has exactly the contents we want. We did this correctly. If you wanted to get rid of the green triangle, you could select Ignore Error. Now, I'm not going to select anything in this menu, so I'm just going to click outside of this menu to make it go away, and I'm going to undo the last step that I performed in Excel. That was adding the apostrophe to cell B3, so I'm going to press the Undo shortcut key. That's Command-Z on the Mac, Control-Z on Windows, and then notice that cell B3 turns back into a number, and I know this because now it's right justified instead of being left justified, and the reason I'm doing this is because I'm going to show you another technique that I've seen people use that looks like it's turning numbers into text, but it just impacts cell formatting, not the values in the cells. And this can lead to spreadsheet errors. And this happens when you select text from the formatting menu. So with cell B3 selected, let's head to the formatting menu. It probably says General for this cell. Then select text. It's toward the bottom of this menu, and notice that cell B3 becomes left justified. But big warning, our total value didn't change. It's still 72,716. So by selecting formatting and changing that to text, it formats the cell's value as if it were text, but it doesn't convert the underlying number to text. So if you want to be positive that the value won't be treated as a number, you want to use an apostrophe. We can also see this problem this way. If I click back in cell B8, I click on sigma, the sum function still selects B3 as part of the range. I don't want that. If I press return to accept this, I've got an error. So I'm going to undo twice. That gets rid of the text formatting in the cell. I can see that the number's right justified. Then I can use my keyboard techniques to add an apostrophe to the beginning of this cell. Then I can head back to cell B8. I can click on the sigma to add the sum function. Excel now sees B3 as text. That leading apostrophe is hidden. And because B3 is text, Excel doesn't include it in the range selection. Nice, just what we want. So hopefully showing you the difference between the apostrophe to convert numbers to text versus just using text formatting, which impacts the formatting but leaves the values as numbers. This will help you avoid mistakes by thinking that a number formatted as text is treated as text. It isn't. Want to get rid of the warning triangle in cell B3? Just click B3, select the yield sign drop-down just to the left, select ignore error. The green triangle goes away. We didn't have to do that. I actually prefer to have the green triangles in there. After you use Excel for a while, you'll come to expect those little warnings to show up in certain places, and you might even become so accustomed to this that you can use it as a quick check to make sure that things are behaving as you expect. But if it bothers you, or if you're using a workbook as part of a presentation, you can ignore the warnings, remove the green triangles. It's entirely up to you. Now we're going to cover named cells, named ranges, and I'll highlight some of the things that I've seen that have tripped up students in the past when they've tried to use these techniques. So first, let's name a cell. If we click on cell B8, we see B8 shows up in the name box, and that's just to the left of the formula bar. Now, the reason we call this the name box is because we can use this area to give a cell address or a cell range a name, and then we can use that name inside of our worksheet formulas and functions. So let's double click to highlight B8 in the name box, and then just over the top of that, we'll type in total, all capitals, underscore 2019, press return, and we've just given B8 the name total underscore 2019. The full name is cut off a bit in the box, but it's in there. Now watch the entry in the name box change as we use the arrow keys to move around the worksheet. So if we're off of cell B8, we see the traditional letter, number, cell address, but when we return to B8, we see that it's called total 2019. And if I'm off of cell B8, if I want to return to that cell, I can just go up to the name box, click these arrows to show any named cells or ranges, pull down the drop-down menu, and select the name total underscore 2019, and my selection immediately returns to that cell. Now let's use this named cell in a function, and let's do that by calculating each region's percentage of the 2019 total revenue. So we'll put that in a new column to the right of the 2019 total. I'll right-click on column C and select Insert. And why don't we name this in cell C3 as percentage of total, and then in C4, let's write a formula that gives us a percentage of the total. So we'll say equals, and then I'll use the left arrow to select B4. I'll put in a slash for divided by, and I'm going to start to type in total. So I'll type in TOT, and let's take a look at Excel's autocomplete. Now, we know that this is going to suggest any functions that have TOT in them, like subtotal here, but it also now shows any named cells that have TOT in it, so we can see total underscore 2019 in here. Why don't we highlight that, then press tab, and the value is entered into my formula. If we press return, the result is calculated properly. Now it's formatted showing $0 because we have to change the format to a percentage. Why don't we add 1 decimal point? Much better. So we've just created a named cell and we've used it in a formula. Cool. Now let's double click the fill handle in C4, and the formula's copied down through C7, and these formulas are all calculated correctly. So very important point, we see that the named cell acts like an absolute reference. And we can confirm everything looks good by summing up the value in C8. This should sum up to 100%. It shows $1, but that's really 100% if we convert it to a percentage with 1 decimal. I'm going to do that with the format painter. Looking good. Now we've just named a single cell. We can also name a range of cells. So let's highlight the cells from B4 through B7. Now the range doesn't show in the name box. It only shows the first cell that was selected, so that's B4 here. But if I type in a new name in the name box, the entire selection will be named, the equivalent of B4 colon B7. So I'm going to give this selection the name revenue, all caps, underscore 19. Then press return, and we've just created a named range. And let's see this named range in action. First, we'll see Excel will default and use the name whenever the range is selected. So let's return to cell B8. We're going to delete the old range inside of the parentheses. I'm going to switch to edit mode, so that's Control U on the Mac or Function key 2 on Windows. I'll delete the existing range. Then I'll press the up arrow. I'm in B7. We see B7 shows up in the formula, but I'm going to select the rest of the range now. So I'm going to hold down my Shift key and then press up arrow once, B6 colon B7, hold down Shift up arrow again, B5 colon B7, but let's do that one more time. Shift up arrow and look at this. Revenue underscore 19 is automatically entered in the function. Excel defaults to the named range. Cool. Same thing is going to happen if I click with a mouse. So if I click up here and I start to drag, we see the traditional addresses show up in the selection until I've selected the entire range that's named, and then Excel will switch over and use my name revenue_19. Nice. Now let's press return to accept this, but now let's learn to watch out for some mistakes I've seen students make when using named ranges. Now all of these are related to the fact that named ranges are by default treated as absolute references by Excel. So look what happens if we select from C3 through C8, copy this, and then paste it in starting at cell E3, and with a quick glance we don't see any errors, but the total value suggests there's a problem, because we should be totaling up to 100%, but we're not. What's happening? Well, if we double click on a cell like E4, we see that this formula is using total 2019 in the denominator. That's because total 2019 is an absolute reference, and we see the same problem if we click on the cells below this. Well, let's fix this, and why don't we do this by creating a named range from D4 through D7, and just to show that we can do this, instead of putting a total value in D8, why don't we use the named range in a sum function that we'll put in the denominator of each cell where we calculate our percentage of total for 2017. So first let's create the named range. So with D4 through D7 highlighted, we'll name this range as revenue_17, press return. Now let's modify the formula in E4. We'll change the denominator, so instead of dividing by total_19, we'll replace that with sum revenue_17. See the difference? So by using sum in here, we didn't need to create a separate total cell. Also notice that once our formula has revenue 17 in it, the entire range that we just named shows up highlighted in pink, looking good. Now press return, and we've got a correct calculation in E4. So let's copy this down below. We'll double click on the fill handle in E4. The formula is copied through E7. We see E8 now sums up to 100%, looking good. And if you want, you can double click in each of the individual cells, and we can see the highlighted name range shows up in each one, just like we wanted. Now here's another thing to be aware of. You might say, okay, I'm in B8 and I'm summing up all of the cells just above this, so now I want to do this in all of the rest of the cells in the total row, but because of absolute referencing of our name range, if we click on the fill handle and copy to the right, we can see that we end up copying what we have in B8, which is that absolute reference, instead of shifting the cell reference to the right. So let's undo the mistake, and why don't we return to cell B8, and we can replace the named reference that we have in here with a traditional range reference. So if we type in B4:B7, it hasn't changed to the named reference. So now we'll press return, and if we drag to the right, we're no longer copying the formula of the named range, which was an absolute reference. We're copying our relative reference. Those values are shifting properly relative to the right as we drag to the right, and we're getting what we expected across row 8. Now you can verify this by double clicking on each of the individual cells. The selections are showing up just as we expected. I just need to reformat the percentage totals, and I'll use the format painter for that. And while we finish, let's add an average row in row number 9. And we'll use this to reinforce some important points about being careful when Excel makes some selections for us, and also when using named ranges. So in cell A9, let's enter the word average, and then in B9, instead of entering the formula, I'm going to head up to the sigma icon, which we usually click to add the sum function, but this time I'm going to click on the little pull-down menu just to its right. This reveals a list of common functions you can access with just one click, and let's select average. Now again, we see that the selection is not what we want, and this is why it's really important to pay attention to any selections that Excel makes automatically. We want to average our regions, but we see that Excel also included the cell that has the total of all of these regions. That would distort the average of the regions, and that would give us the wrong result. For average to work, we want to make sure that we eliminate this total region from the region average, so we can just click on cell B4, hold down the mouse, drag to B7, but look what's happening. Excel automatically shifts this to a named range. Now that's going to be an absolute reference, so we need to be careful here too, because if we press return and we use the fill handle to fill to the right, we also don't get what we want, but you now know how to fix this, so click back in cell B9, then replace the named range with B4:B7, press return. Now we can drag the fill handle to the right and we're getting what we want. And I'm going to use Format Painter to select the formats for the values in row 8 and paste them into row 9. But we see how easy it is to make these mistakes, so we really want to make sure that we pay attention whenever we let Excel automate things like selecting ranges for us. Now to check your work, you can always double click on a cell, and that puts you into the cell's edit mode so that you can see any formulas that are inside of the cell, and Excel also highlights the cells and ranges with its nice color coding. Then you can press the escape key to exit from edit mode, and you can double click on any other cells to take a look at the formulas inside of them and the related color coding. Just remember to press escape when you're done. But there's another quick way that we can see all of the formulas in all of our cells. Now it doesn't offer the nice color coding that we see in edit mode, but it's a useful technique that you should know about as well. You can show all formulas in all cells by clicking on on the Formulas tab and then selecting the Show Formulas icon. It's not pretty and it removes formatting, but it's another way to, at a single glance, see all of the formulas in our worksheet. Now the Show Formulas icon acts as a toggle, so I'll just click it again to return to my normal spreadsheet view. Now while we're in the Formula ribbon, I want to show you a few more things that we can use when we're working with names. Now before we do that, I want to mention one more thing that's important to keep in mind. Any named cells or named ranges that you create, those are specific to the entire workbook, not just the worksheet. So if you use a name in one worksheet, you can't reuse it in another one. Now sometimes you want to delete or rename any cell names or named ranges, and you can do this also inside of the Formulas tab. Now this is one of the few areas where there are differences between the Mac and Windows versions of Excel. Now eventually this functionality will be available on the Mac. Microsoft is unifying the code base for Windows and Mac. So Mac users, you can look to see if this feature is available in your version, but if the feature that I'm showing for Windows is not available, right after I show the Windows feature, I'll show a Mac workaround. So in Windows, make sure you're in the Formula ribbon, and you should see a selection for Name Manager. When you click this, you should see a list of any cell or range names that were created as part of this workbook, and to rename a name, just double-click the name, enter the new name in the Edit Name box that pops up, click OK, and you've made the change. Now, unfortunately for Mac users, this is going to be a bit more difficult. Windows users, pay attention because I'm going to demonstrate Find and Replace at the end, and that's a really useful Excel feature to know about. So Mac users, also make sure that you're in the Formulas ribbon and click on Define Name. Now this pulls up the Define Name box. Now in here we see that we've named our total cell with a full year, total_2019, but our revenue ranges are named with just the last 2 digits of the year. So let's say that we want to change total_2019 to just total_19. You might think that all you need to do is to select the value, then delete these 2 digits, the 2 and the 0, then select OK. But no, that won't work, because if we click on Define Name again, we see what that really did was it created a second range named total_19, but it kept total_2019. So you might think, well, let's highlight total_2019 and then press this minus icon that's below the list of names. Well, that deletes total_2019, but it doesn't change the total_2019 references that were in our worksheet. And if we click OK, we'll see a bunch of name errors show up in every cell that references that name that we just deleted. This is Excel's way of telling us that these cells contain a formula that refers to a name that doesn't exist. So if we click in cell C4, we see this refers to total_2019, but remember we just deleted that name, hence the error when we look at the warning under the Yield menu, invalid name error. So how can we fix this? Well, you've probably used Find and Replace in other programs like Word. Well, Excel has Find and Replace too. Just click on the magnifying glass in the upper right-hand corner of the Excel window, and this will expand to form an area where you can enter an expression to find, but what we want to do is we want to click on the little pull-down menu that's just to the right of the magnifying glass, and we want to select Replace. Now this brings up the Replace dialog box, and in the Find What field, we want to enter the old name, that's total, all caps, _2019, and in the Replace With field, we want to enter the new name, that's total, all caps, _19. Then when we click on the Replace All button, Excel says it made 4 replacements, and if we take a look behind this dialog box, we can see the errors have gone away, and all our calculations look great. So let's click on OK to close this one box, click on Close to get rid of the other, and you now know how to use Find and Replace in Excel. Nice work. Now let's head back to the Home tab. We're going to learn one last thing in this video lesson, and that's how we can add lines inside of an existing cell to create multi-line cells. So let's do this inside of cell C4. Now if we change the contents of this cell so that it reads percentage of 2019 total instead of just percentage of total, that will add a really long value inside of this cell. And it's in the cell now, the value's just being cut off to the right because there's something in cell D3. Now we could stretch out the column width, but columns look best when they're sized for the width of their values, not the width of a very long header. Now what if we want the first part, percentage of 2019, to be on one line and the word total to be below this line, but we want both of those 2 lines to be inside of a single cell? Well, we can do this. We just need to add a line feed character inside of our cell. That adds an extra line below the line feed character, and we do this by holding down the Option key while pressing Return on the Mac, or in Windows, holding down the Alt key while pressing Return. So I'm going to do this right now in between 2019 and total, and it might not immediately look like I've got 2 lines in this cell. All you see is the word total. That's on the second line. What about what's above this? Well, we can't see it because the row height is formatted for just 1 line. But look at this. I can actually expand my formula bar so that it shows multiple lines. I can move my cursor just above the column letters. We see that it turns into the resize cursor with the arrows pointing up and down. And if you click and drag down, we can actually expand the height of the formula bar, and we can see, ho, we've got 2 lines of text in this cell. Now this can be useful, but what we really want to do is to expand the cell's row height, and we already know how to do that. You just double click on the line between rows 3 and row 4. That should auto-fit the row height. Now, our row height actually changes to 3 lines big. This is just a quirk in Excel. Excel, for some reason, is thinking that we need 3 lines of text instead of just 2 lines, but we can fix this pretty easily. Let's just head up to column C, stretch this out a little bit, then we'll auto-fit row 3 by double-clicking between the 3 and the 4. The row height looks perfect. Let's click and drag and shrink the formula bar back to its normal 1-line height. Now we can go back and we can auto-fit the width of column C. That looks perfect as well. Now let's apply the same technique in cell E3. So we'll type in percentage of 2017 total. I'll put no space between the 2017 and total, and right after 2017, I'll press Option Return on the Mac, that's Alt Return on Windows, and that adds a line feed to the cell. Nice. Now let's right justify B3 through E3, and there we have it, Excel Explorers. Once again, we've completed a video lesson where we've covered a lot of ground. We learned about the status bar. We now know the difference between edit, enter, and point status. We learned to use the keyboard to edit cells and to make cell and range selections. We learned to treat numeric values as text, to use the apostrophe or single quote character to change a cell's numeric contents to text. We now know how to format numbers as text, but we also know that formatting alone doesn't exclude numbers from calculations. We learned about Excel's error triangles, named cells and named ranges, common errors when working with named cells and named ranges, how to rename named cells and ranges, how to use find and replace in Excel, common errors when Excel selects cell ranges, how to show formulas in all cells, and how to add multiple lines inside of a single cell. Those are some sweet skills, Spreadsheet Scholar. Keep at it.